Yep.
All right, well, welcome to everyone. We'd like to start by acknowledging this traditional territorial's longer existence and its significance for the Indigenous people who lived and continue to live on Turtle Island. We are situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee land. There are Métis and other non-status First People from many Indigenous nations present in our community today. This acknowledgement symbolizes the KFL&A United Way's first step of many along this path towards Indigenous reconciliation in a respectful manner. I would like to welcome you to today's Women United Zoom event. For today's discussion, we have selected, after input from yourselves, the topic of human trafficking. This is a difficult and heavy topic, both to discuss and process. So if you feel like you wish to speak further after this event, please follow up with Bhavana, Jane, or myself. We will be providing our panelists' contact information as well. As always, today's Zoom event will be accessible through the United Way's website. We are delighted to have such a knowledgeable, committed, and passionate group of panelists lined up for today's discussion. While we continue to wait for the chance to reconvene these events in person, we thank you for your patience and continued enthusiastic support of Women United. Today's format will be to have a firsthand account provided by Alexis, who many of you have met earlier today. Then our panelists will speak, followed by our regular question and answer period. Then we will be going into smaller breakout groups for further discussion prior to wrapping up our event. We hope that you will find this event informative and that it provides you with the resources to help join in the ongoing battle against human trafficking. So thank you and welcome. Bhavana?
Thank you, Jessica. I've met most of you, if not all. My name is Bhavana. I'm with the United Way, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time. As Jessica said, this is a difficult topic. It's a heavy topic, and we encourage you, if you want to speak to any of us afterwards, we can link you with agencies who can give you more information, or you can reach out for more support if you need. We will be doing breakout groups, so you'll get a chance to ask questions and have a conversation once we're done with the panels and the question and answers. But we're going to start with a quick poll. So Megan's going to give you a quick poll, some questions, and you can just click on the answers that, so using a scale of 1 to 10, how much of an issue do you think human trafficking is?
We have 50% voted right now.
Yeah, and more coming in.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? I
So
don't
on the
see
right,
10.
It's not a question
Scroll
that
down.
can be answered with agree or disagree. There's not a question there.
Mhm.
It says,
Well,
how
the
much of an
question-
issue? So do I agree or not agree? How much
How
of an
much
issue?
is it?
It's-
Do you think if
Well, which is it? It's asking for a quantity. How much of an issue is it?
and
And you're
there
asking to agree or disagree with the statement.
you're right. I'm sorry about that. Let's move to the next question, Megan. Do you want to do the next question?
Sure.
Now, this is what age range are women most at risk of human trafficking?
Okay, we have almost everyone voted. I'll share the results.
So 78% of you said 14 to 18, and a couple of 8% 19 to 23 and 9 to 13. So you'll find out from our panelists which one is correct. Thank you, Megan. These panels, many of you have been to them before. We've had a series of panels and we really appreciate you taking the time. Today we have, this panel has been sponsored by TD, and with us today is Michelle Wilson, who'll say a couple of words. Michelle?
Thanks, Bhavana. Sorry, you can't see my face. I'm not on an island, but I live in South Frontenac, and the Wi-Fi out here is not good either. So I turn off my camera so I actually can speak to you. But I would just say, of course, TD has been a partner with United Way for many years, and this Women United in particular, I think, has done fabulous work in putting together panels such as these and events, and really bringing awareness to all of us around how we can make a positive impact in our community. And I know personally, I had Angie come out to talk to my branch leadership team pre-COVID, when we could get together in person and talk about this issue in our community. And it was quite shocking, I think, to all of us on how real this is, because of course we don't see it in our day-to-day lives necessarily, but and I think that's why it's important that we have these conversations and that we work together. And that's why I love partnering with United Way, and our organization does, because I can tell you KFL&A United Way is one of the best United Ways out there. I cover great geography, and you know, this team does a fantastic job taking our dollars and investing them and making an immediate impact. And we see it every single day. So definitely proud to be a part of this. And I think you'll find the discussion moving, impactful, and really inspiring in terms of how we can make a difference. Send it back to you, Bhavana.
Thank you, Michelle. And I agree, this United Way is the best United Way, because it's all thanks to all of you. The people in this community have been incredibly supportive. Last year, as you may have read on our website, we invested $5.5 million in 220 programs that helped close to 80,000 people. That's a lot of people who, if we had not been able to support them, would have had some significant needs related to basic needs like food, shelter, mental health, counseling. Today, we're here to talk about human trafficking, which when we first heard about it was completely shocking to us. And I have to say, our panel today is going to give us a really good overview of this issue right here in Kingston and area, what's happening with the women and the men in our community. I first learned about it actually through our agencies, and then I had the pleasure of meeting Alexis, who you're going to hear from. And she has over time become a good friend, and I am so fortunate to, it's a privilege really to get to know Alexis and hear from her. She's a brave, courageous woman. You'll hear from her. You'll hear from Ed Cunningham and Lana Saunders, who actually are very well versed with the issue, and they work with victim services. They are victim services, the Anti-Human Trafficking Association. You'll hear from Chief Antje McNeely, who we are delighted to have with us. I know, Antje, you're really busy and you spent a lot of time on the campaign last year. We're thrilled to have you with us. You'll also hear about how agencies wrap around women once they have been able to come into the community for help. And you'll hear from Lisa Fox from Kingston Interval House, as well as from Kim Graham from Sexual Assault Center Kingston. And these are just some of the agencies that reach out to help people. And Alexis is going to tell you about more agencies that do that. But it's kind of a snapshot. It's not a long panel discussion, it's a short panel discussion. Feel free to add your questions in chat, or when we're done with the panel, we'll open it up so you can call out your questions. And then we will go into breakout groups so that you can learn more in depth or discuss with people how you're feeling after hearing from them. So as I said, Alexis is someone that we have got to know over the years. She's so brave and courageous. I miss having her in Kingston because she's been a volunteer with the United Way for a long time. She's moved out to BC and she's just telling us how gorgeous it is out there and how well she's doing as an educational assistant in the BC school system. So Alexis, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, thank you, Bhavana. I really miss being there in Kingston with you guys too. Just being able to continue being part of the United Way really makes my heart sing. You guys have done so much for me, as I'm about to share, that I'm just so happy that I'm able to give back and still be a part of everything that's going on in Kingston for the youth that are up and coming. So today I'm here to share my story with you. I grew up in Kingston, Ontario with a small group of good friends that I went to elementary school with. I participated in sports and dance, and life seemed like, it was pretty normal to me. My family was always taking a little vacation somewhere in the summertime. It was pretty good. But transitioning into high school was a big step for me, and my life started to take a change. My parents and I used to fight a lot because we had very different outlooks on life and very different ideas of how my life should be lived. And this started to take a toll on my mental health. And at the same time, all of my friends started to ignore me, and no one wanted to hang out with me or even acknowledge my presence. It honestly felt like I was invisible. I had all of these new emotions coming to the surface and no idea how to deal with any of them. I used to beg my mom and dad to let me switch schools, but they wouldn't let me. My dad said, well, why don't you try hanging out with some new people that you really don't know yet? So that's exactly what I did. I can remember trying to figure out who is the least judgmental group of kids in the school, who is pretty much accepting of everybody, right? And then it hit me, the kids that at the smoking pit, the kids that smoked pot. So off I went to make some new friends, and life was great again. And after hanging out with these people for a couple weeks, I got curious about everything that they were doing. I tried smoking cigarettes, and then I tried smoking pot. And before I knew it, I became the exact person that I told myself I would never even be friends with. During the summer between grade 9 and 10, I started to sneak around, staying at my new friends' places for a couple nights or weeks at a time, because I knew my parents wouldn't approve of the things that I was doing. I didn't really care though, because all we did was fight anyways. Why did it matter? Things finally came to a head one late, rainy summer night. I got kicked out of my parents' house, but honestly, it didn't even really faze me. I actually felt like I had gained some freedom from my parents, from their ridiculous expectations and the constant fight for attention. But by the second semester of grade 10, I felt so tired. I couldn't remember the last time I had a full night of sleep. Bouncing around from house to house and couch to couch was finally starting to take a toll on me. And now looking back, I'm able to see that my anxiety and depression was spiraling out of control. One day I fell asleep on the floor in front of my locker. So I decided to call my grandparents, and they came and picked me up, and I started to slowly move in with them. My grandparents supported me and cared for me. They loved me unconditionally and helped me with anything I asked for. And I seriously mean anything. I was living the good life as far as I was concerned, but I was still hanging out with the same people and keeping things under the radar from my grandparents. One night I went out to my friend's house to a party, and I met a guy and we hit it off right away. I didn't know that this night would be the start of a very rough road ahead. This was the night that I tried cocaine for the first time. And by the end of grade 10, I was a full-blown addict. I spent that summer staying with my new boyfriend who didn't go to school and sold drugs with his father for a living. I was doing cocaine every day, and all I could think to myself was, well, why not? It's not like I'm paying for it and no one really cares anyways, so what does it matter? I couldn't see the effects that it was having on my behavior and appearance, but others sure could. Going back to school in grade 11 was a noticeable struggle for me. A couple of weeks in, my VP, Miss Stevens, told me that she had arranged for me to meet with a youth counselor named Dave. I thought, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm barely at school anyways. Good luck with that one. I continued on the same path, and that year was a blur spent doing drugs and drinking and being as rebellious as I possibly could. The good thing was, though, that I had met Dave. Even though I was struggling and making all of these really bad decisions, he was there to let me know I wasn't alone. That was really important to me because I didn't have my parents, and my grandparents were totally in the dark about everything going on in my life. Partway through that year, I became very depressed, and I thought about taking my life multiple times. Dave sent the police to my house to do a couple wellness checks because I was having a pretty rough go. And when I was admitted to the psychiatric floor at KGH, he came almost every day to see me. Summer came again, and I was still on the same bad path, living with my boyfriend and his dad, drinking and drugging and partying all the time. I hated the person that I had become. That was the summer that I tried smoking meth. Grade 12 was more of the same, and 2 weeks before graduation, I was expelled from school for very obvious reasons. This was also the year that I had met some guys at a bar one night. They decided to take advantage of my vulnerabilities, and I found out what human trafficking is all about. Needless to say, the devastating effects of this experience broke me. Being taken from Toronto to Kingston and back to Ottawa, all within one night, it definitely started to take a toll on me. I'm sure all of you can think back to a time where someone said something or did something for you and it made a massive impact on you in a positive way. You can probably remember what they were wearing, where you were, and exactly what was said. For me, that person was Dave. He cared. He took the time to listen and help when he could. He really did the best to understand me and what I was going through. Sitting here speaking to all of you today, I can honestly say that nobody wakes up and says to themselves, today's the day I'm going to get addicted to drugs. Today's the day I'm going to let somebody else control my life. But I can tell you it happens a lot easier than you think. By 18, I became the girl who kept being mistreated and formed a habit of saying, it's okay. I became the girl who was always taken for granted, and I dealt with it by repeating, everything will be fine. By 18, I became the exact girl I told myself I would never be. If you would have asked 16-year-old me, where do you see yourself in 9 years? I never would have guessed I'd be sitting here speaking to all of you. Today, I'm a 25-year-old woman who has finished high school, received 2 different diplomas from college programs, and was hired to work for the same school board that kicked me out in Ontario. I moved across the country alone and secured a full-time job here in BC, and I can finally say that I'm figuring it all out. Life has never been easy for me, and quite honestly, I don't think that it ever will be. I can look at my experiences in a negative way, or I can look at it as a chance to learn and grow and help others. I'm sure you guys can guess which one I have chosen. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow is right. Thank you, Alexis. And I'm so happy for you. You are doing amazingly well, and you're giving back, and you're very generous and courageous. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I remember being part of the last one maybe 2 years ago in Kingston, and I'm so happy that I can continue to give back to the Kingston community who gave so much to me.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chief of Police, Kingston Chief of Police, Antje McNeely. So Angie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Alexis, for sharing your story with us. Very proud of you. So human trafficking for us, for the Kingston Police, has really come onto our radar back in 2011 when Timea Nagy reached out to myself and to us and to tell us about what human trafficking was actually happening in the Kingston area. And some of you may have already heard me speak about Timea, but just a short little story about her is that she is a survivor of human trafficking, and her story involves coming to Canada back in 1998 from Budapest, Hungary, at the age of 20, after answering an ad in the paper that was looking for young women for temporary domestic work in Canada and promising lots of money. She arrived in Toronto expecting to find meaningful work and employment, but instead was quickly picked up by 2 Hungarian men who told her she owed them a lot of money for the flight to Canada. And then subsequently, she found herself into the middle of an operation run by both Hungarian and Canadians, forced to work in Toronto's sex trade industry to pay off debts to her traffickers, debts that never existed. She described working 17 hours a day, receiving little food and very little sleep, becoming numb to what was happening. Fear and shame were instilled into her. She gradually learned English and began to have some trust in some people that were in the strip club that she worked. And eventually she was able to reach out for some help to police. Timea eventually started helping others, raising awareness about human trafficking, educating the police and communities through speaking engagements. She now runs a for-profit business called Timea's Cause, designed to tackle and educate the public about human trafficking from different angles. As an example, she offers an online human trafficking detection training for frontline officers, which some of our members have taken. We have since received grant funding over the years to partner with victim services for City of Kingston and Frontenac County, specifically with Lana Saunders, to educate staff working in the accommodation industry, as well as the transportation industry, on what signs to look for and to call police if human trafficking is occurring. And then Sergeant Ed Cunningham heads up our street crime unit, which has been part of its mandate is to address human trafficking in our community. Grant funding has allowed our officers and community partners to be trained in human trafficking recruitment techniques and to provide education within our schools for students from grade 9 to 12. Sergeant Cunningham is also a member of the anti-trafficking working group that has been initiated in Kingston, I think around 2018, and involves the participation of staff from many of our local community partners. These are only some of the few initiatives that we're involved in. But from a Kingston Police perspective, I can give an example where the education provided by Victim Services and Kingston Police with the accommodation industry to from alert staff to call police when they suspected some human trafficking was happening. Involved 3 young men in 21 hotel room. Their pimps were staying in a room 1 floor above. And when the police arrived, one of them texted them and advised them that the cops were here. And the pimps, of course, fled the scene. When our plainclothes street crime officers arrived, they spoke to the young women. 2 denied being there against their will. But the officer said to the obviously underage girl, who turned out to be 14 years old, he told her that he was not leaving there without her. She immediately packed up her bags and left with the police. She was eventually reunited with her mother in southwestern Ontario. After a lengthy investigation, 3 males were charged with procuring a minor, trafficking a minor, advertising sexual services, and material benefit trafficking in a minor. The court case began in September of 2017 and ended just in June of 2020 with convictions where the pimp was sentenced to 5 years in prison. So just an example of how long some of these cases can take going through the court system. The story behind them is the 3 young women and 3 men were traveling together Guelph and Peterborough with the pimps using local ads. So when they arrived to Kingston, they were only there but for a few hours when a manager called out to the Kingston police. So it just takes that one call and something can happen in terms of a connection. One final case of note came to police via the citizen calling in regarding a domestic in progress. In fact, it was a pimp who was viciously assaulting a woman he was trafficking, which occurred outside a local establishment and involved the pimp continuing the assault while in their vehicle. Upon police arrival, he initially that she had been pimped out, but was very reluctant to be talking about it. This particular court case has since concluded with the offender being convicted of 11 human trafficking, sexual and violent offenses in relation to her. He was sentenced to a total of 5.5 years incarceration, less the 3 months on account of pretrial custody, and he had restrictive bail conditions. As of November the 1st, 2020, the Kingston Police have seconded 1 member to the OPP Joint Forces Operations Trafficking Unit for East Region. The team's goal is to identify, investigate, and disrupt human trafficking and child exploitation organized crime in Ontario, and to address the threat of organized crime. We have already had a success story in which our officer played an integral role in locating a male who was wanted on multiple warrants pertaining to human trafficking. It's alleged that between August and November 2020, the man had been trafficking a female victim, and during and made threats to harm her and her family. Further alleged that the man, as well as 2 accomplices, conspired to make the victim recant her statement from an ongoing investigation involving the man. He was arrested November 18th, 2020. In July 2020, the OPP Anti-Human Trafficking Investigation Coordinating Team, with the assistance of other partner agencies, including the Kingston Police, dismantled a commercial sex trade victims in Kitchener, Peterborough, Sarnia, and Sudbury, who provided sexual services to clients responding to online advertisements, and these persons have been charged with 32 offenses. I think the key here is the importance of a collaborative approach, not only within communities, but provincially and nationally, to address human trafficking. Victims may have contacts with different agencies, including admissions to hospitals via overdoses or injuries, before they are ready to talk about what's happening to them. Police investigations are complex and often multi-jurisdictional, and the judicial system is still an adversarial system. So unfortunately, human trafficking is live in Kingston and many other areas. But the good thing is that we are becoming very collaborative in the work that we're doing. And I just wanted to bring to the attention, because I know we've got some community partners here as well. And we have a victim support grant that just came out for 2 years, 2021 to 2022, and then 2022 to 23. And it's $200,000, so $100,000 per year. And it has to do with initiatives, the police partnering with community agencies, working on a focus of at least whether it's human trafficking or intimate partner violence. So I bring that to everybody's attention here as to think of some ideas that potentially we could partner on in terms of this grant that has just come out through the government. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. It's wonderful to hear that this collaboration is happening and that there is a recognition that no one organization or government institution can do it alone. So it's great that Kingston Police are partnering with OPP, also with our partners in the community. And we're thrilled that a lot of our agencies are participating in that initiative. At the end of the session, we will send you in a follow-up email as well as in the chat. We'll send you to our website where those who want to help out, Lana has given us a list of things that you can contribute if you want to help out in many ways for victims and survivors, so that there is a list on our website that you can access. Once we're done with this panel, we'll send you the link. Ed Cunningham and Lana Saunders are here with us. They are part of Victim Services Kingston and Frontenac. Lana is an anti-human trafficking crisis worker, and they're all part of this community anti-human trafficking working group you'll hear more about. So Lana and Ed, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi there, thank you, Ed Cunningham. Thanks very much for having you here this afternoon to speak about this very important topic. Also, thank you to Alexis for being here and sharing your story. I've taken part in a lot of these panels and presentations over the year, and I always find it so much more impactful to get sort of the story right from a survivor who's lived it. So thanks very much for that. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time talking about myself, because some things here as we go along. But I did want to echo, as Chief McNeely had spoke about, the importance of working, collaborating, not only with other police agencies, but also as important, especially in Kingston, with our community partner agencies who we rely on so much to sort of bring these occurrences to our attention.
Okay, thanks, Ed. I just wanted to extend a big thank you to Alexis for sharing her story. It's very brave of you to come forward and speak to so many people about your experiences, and I just want to thank you. Again, my name's Lana Saunders. I am the anti-human trafficking crisis worker with Victim Services of Kingston and Frontenac. A little bit about my role within the community. I've been an HT specific worker since 2017. My job entails things such as this, training sessions, education and awareness, delivering presentations, sometimes with Ed, sometimes I go out on my own and do them, just depends on the need. We present to community partners, other agencies, service providers, community groups, students, we've done schools. And I also do a lot of one-on-one with youth at risk at the request of service providers as well. I work with victims of human trafficking. So I work with those who are being trafficked currently, who have been trafficked, but I also have opened up, and I'm working a lot with youth at risk within our community, okay? Trying to prevent trafficking from happening, right? I work based off of referrals, so I can take referrals, even self-referrals, but most of my referrals come from police or social workers at the hospital, Maltby Center, Family and Children's Services, school counselors, school principals, teachers. Those types of places generate my referrals mostly. So yes, other victim service sites as well, because there are, like we've already learned earlier today, there can be transportation involved. And so just because a victim is trafficked in one particular area, they could be from another, right? So, okay. Another thing I want to say is the victims that I work with don't have to disclose to police in order for me to work with them. And what I do with the victim is generally I support them, right? And I connect them to other community partners and agencies who specialize in their own area of support. So if they have financial needs, if they're housing, if they need safe accommodation and housing, I can connect them, counseling, those types of things. And I also want to say that our program, Victim Services, is funded through the Ministry of the Attorney General. So there is a program called the VQRP. It's the Victim Quick Response Program that offers some that offers funding as well, specifically to victims of human trafficking. So I can tap into those funds. But of course, you have to meet criteria and tick certain boxes. So it's always good to have other donations, like Bhavana was saying. There are other things that I do need for my clients that sometimes I have a hard time accessing from the ministry. So it's always good to have that little bit of extra, right? I know Chief McNeely spoke about what we have done in the past with the hotel and motel industry and the transportation industry, taxis, buses, train stations. We've done our very best to try and educate the whole community. Yeah, so that's a bit more of what I do with Victim Services. And yeah.
Thank you. And the one thing I did want to point out is, as Lana mentioned, we do a lot of these presentations, and when we do the presentations in the community, it's usually 1.5 hours to 2 hours. So we're really scaling it down as far as what we're able to speak about. So we've picked out what we think to be the most important things. Obviously, our contact info is going to be put out at the end of the presentation. Feel free, obviously, to reach out to either one of us if you're looking for more information, sort of from the expanded version of what we normally talk about. I don't want to bore everybody with a bunch of legal definitions and that sort of thing, but I think it is important to sort of break down what we're talking about here sort of quickly, that being human sex trafficking and exploitation. So we'll go through the definitions of those sort of fairly quickly, just so you kind of know what you're looking at or what you should be looking for. Human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, receiving, holding, concealing, or harboring of a person or exercising control, direction, or influence over the movement of a person for the purpose of exploiting them or facilitating their exploitation. So that kind of constitutes the trafficking and human trafficking side of the offenses. The key part, of the most serious part of human trafficking is the exploitation. And the exploitation as defined for human sex trafficking can be applicable to any of the human trafficking related offenses, which is the sex trafficking, the sex trafficking of minors, material benefits, which essentially is when the pimp is making money and living sort of large off of the profits of sex trafficking, and withholding and destroying documents. And the exploitation essentially is when somebody exploits another person or causes them to provide or offer to provide labor or service by engaging in conduct that in all circumstances could reasonably be expected to cause the other person to believe that their safety or the safety of a person known to them is being threatened. So basically the exploitation is what the trafficker is doing to make the victim stay in that situation, whether it's violence, whether it's threats to the victim family, friends, other loved ones. It's anything that's going to make them feel that they have to stay in that situation.
And I guess just to further clarify, because one of the questions that Ed and I get asked quite often when we present is, well, what's the difference between human trafficking and independent sex work? And we kind of like to break it down in the sense that a lot of it has to do with choice. When somebody is being trafficked, all choice has been taken away from that person. So they don't get to choose their clients. They don't get to choose what services they provide to those clients. They don't get to choose their hours, their working hours. They don't get to choose things like where they will service their clients, if they're allowed to use condoms. Literally all of that choice is being taken away from them. Yeah, and of course, the money, all of the money they make is being handed right back to the perpetrator or their pimp, right? The trafficker. I guess moving on, we can talk about a little bit about who the victims are. Unfortunately, a lot of times victims look like Alexis, right? Younger. So the 14 to 18 age range is what I deal with most often. And youth at risk, of course, will be on the younger scale there. We know that traffickers are targeting younger and younger girls. And when I say girls, I just want to clarify that when we present, just for like ease of execution, we refer to the victims as female, but we do know that there are male victims, and we generally tend to refer to the perpetrators as male, but of course we do know that there can be female perpetrators. So the victims generally, most of the time are female, a lot of times young, naive, economically disadvantaged. That happens a lot. So those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, those whose basic necessities are not being met. Girls like Alexis, who there's family conflict in the home and they don't feel like they can stay in their home. They're at risk, obviously, of homelessness. Mental health issues come into play a lot of times for various reasons. It could be from past trauma or victimization. I've actually had quite a few clients who, have been victimized by more than one perpetrator, right? Substance abuse and like addiction and dependency, that can come into play as well. Girls with low self-esteem or self-worth, of course. I want to say that is very, very common, right? The most common, actually. And individuals who there's been a history of violence or sexual abuse in the home, whether it has been against them or they've just seen it modeled in the home. Those who have experienced that are more likely to fall into being victimized, right? Okay, good.
And another thing that came up when we sort of had the pre-meeting was perpetrators. What does a typical perpetrator look like? Sort of who should be looking for, that sort of thing. The easier answer is it really could be anybody. It's hard to say who your typical trafficker is going to be. It's not going to be like somebody you see in the movies. It's really going to jump out at you. The one thing that we have seen is it depends on what type of trafficking you're looking at or where the victim is being trafficked from. If it's somebody who is trafficking sort of up and down the 401 or going from city to city and they're staying in hotels, it's more typical that you're going to find a trafficker who is much closer in age to the victim. The simple reason being that you don't want to stand out. If you've got a 50-year-old male checking into a hotel with a 14 to 18-year-old girl, that it doesn't appear to be a daughter, it's really going to stand out and sort of raise red flags for staff, especially if you're staying for a few days at a time. There's people coming and going. So in cases like that, I mean, a lot of times you will see the perpetrator or the trafficker much closer to your victim in age. In cases where it's sort of a more localized thing, where it's somebody that's being trafficked here locally in Kingston, we are seeing cases where the traffickers are older men, in their 50s, where they're kind of set up from an established base. They're not traveling around. So we are seeing both different types. It's really hard to zero in and say that person's a trafficker. But that's kind of what we've noticed. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. I'd just like to say before we move on to the next point, which is the signs and the red flags, it might be hard for you to kind of wrap your head around the whole concept, because for me, working in this field for like 4 or 5 years now, I'm learning, or I learned very quickly on that it isn't cookie cutter. It doesn't look like one particular scenario. People's vulnerabilities change from person to person, and the way in which they are, I don't want to say talked into, but led into trafficking, it can present very differently. So basically it's a vulnerable person, and then you have a perpetrator who is tapping into that vulnerability, finding out what their need is, meeting those needs, and forcing them into the exploitation by means like manipulation, deception, coercion, threat, force, whatever the hook is for them. They tap into that very quickly, and that's how they get them to I don't want to say agree, but that's how they manipulate them or get them to produce the sex work, right?
It really is an organized type of crime. I mean, there's tons of information even on the internet on how to become a human trafficker. There's a really thorough and thought out process that goes into it. We don't have a lot of time to break that down right now, but if you are curious, and if you do a Google search on, how to be a sex trafficker or pimping 101, you'll see there actually are books out there, which is a bit disturbing in itself. The next point we'll go through pretty quickly, and again, is kind of the value of having Alexis here is, I mean, she really did in her story, she kind of touched on or kind of pointed out a lot of the signs or indicators that we sort of had listed here. So it kind of will have a bit more meaning for you maybe. And some of the things that we've kind of picked up on is, new or different social circles, you're finding a different group of friends, reaching out to new people, truancy, you're missing school, your grades are slipping, that sort of thing. Increased use of drugs, alcohol, unexplained absences, maybe from school or from sports activities or from home even. Changes in behavior, mood swings, you're argumentative, you're distractive. Start more so later into the trafficking, you start dressing differently, much more provocatively. Hairs are done, nails done, new clothing, expensive gifts, purses, that sort of thing that they wouldn't have had before. Earlier on, you have what sort of appears to be a boyfriend or a partner, later on becomes the trafficker. So somebody that shows up sort of out of the blue that was never in the picture before and is spending a lot of time with the victim. Victims in possession of larger sums of cash, again, initially, later on into the trafficking, they typically don't have cash at their disposal, but sort of in the grooming stages, they're going to have sort of money to go out and spend and buy things they normally wouldn't. Especially if it's somebody who doesn't work, who doesn't have means to have that kind of cash or those kind of gifts. It's just, there's a lot more indicators, and then sometimes there may be no indicators at all. But so that's just kind of a list of some things maybe to keep in mind that might jump out at you.
Yeah, we'd also like to point out that again, it's not cookie cutter, so you don't have to tick all of these boxes. All of the flags don't have to be present, but it's when you're getting a few of them, 4 or 5, and then you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach like something's not right. And I'm saying this because I'm sure you're wondering what you, as citizens or parents, can do to prevent or to detect, right? So it's the signs plus that feeling that something's not right. Having open dialogue with your children is very important. So we just like to say, keep the lines of communication open. What you can do, you're doing it today by educating yourself and being here, listening to all of the panelists speak. Teaching your kids early on about online safety, very important, and monitoring their use of technology. I know myself, I have 3 teenagers, and they do like to lock themselves in their room with their iPads or iPhones, their devices. And it's important to know who they're talking to, educating them on, like I said, internet safety, and keeping those lines of communication open, right? We're looking at for our own kids, but also when we educate our youth, they can look after themselves, hopefully, but also they can keep an eye on their peers as well. That's very important. Any survivor that I've spoken to has said that had they had more education in the area of human trafficking, they may not have fallen victim or prey to a trafficker or a perpetrator. So it's very important. And during COVID, we're finding that more youth are on their devices, right, for longer periods of time. So Ed?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was one of the things with COVID. I think when the pandemic first struck and the lockdown measures were a little more extreme, there was a brief period of time where I think we were seeing less traffic to hotels, that sort of thing. It seemed that the ads had slowed down a little bit on the internet. Unfortunately, the sex trade business didn't really slow down for long, and business was kind of back up as usual. We were still seeing sort of an increase of ads, all that sort of thing. So it didn't really impact how the trafficking was sort of happening. Unfortunately, the business was what it was. I mean, people were willing to go out and sort of disregard the protocols and all that. So it did go on. The problem was, especially, and again, I'm talking more about sort of the hotel motel side of things, is there weren't a lot of other guests in the hotels. There was very little staff working in hotels, and we just weren't getting the calls, or haven't been getting the calls that we typically do when somebody sees something or hears something. So, I mean, looking at it from that perspective, it did kind of impact us in a negative way. And the other thing that's sort of kind of our bread and butter is the education and awareness component of human trafficking in our community. And obviously with COVID, we don't have the opportunity to get out in front of sort of the larger in-person crowds or audiences where we can have a much more dynamic and sort of interactive presentation. So we've been trying to go the Zoom route. We've been having groups. This is one of the bigger Zoom groups we've had. So we've been kind of making do as best we can, but we really are looking forward to things opening up and being able to spread the word sort of in a much broader way.
Thank you, Lana and Ed, for all the work you do. And Lana, I'm so glad that you were able to tell our panel members that just learning, educating themselves and being aware of the signs is the first step, because I know all of us are sitting here wondering how on earth can we resolve this? How can we make this go away? So thank you for that. We'll come back to you. There are a couple of questions, so we'll come back to you in the Q&A section, but thank you for the work and thank you for taking the time to share with us. Now we'll talk about what the community does. So you've heard from the police, you've heard from Alexis. We have some amazing agencies. So the agency that Alexis referred to was actually Youth Diversion, which is not directly about human trafficking, but as you heard from Ed, it could come in various forms. Each situation is different. So in Alexis's case, she was able to access support through a worker who worked in youth diversion. So it's really important that all our agencies are fully aware of what's happening. So I'm going to turn to Kim Graham from Sexual Assault Center Kingston, who's going to tell you a little bit about how their agency wraps around when they do meet someone who's a victim or a survivor.
Thank you. And thank Alexis for sharing your story as well. And thanks for having me. So really quickly, I've been at the center for about 12 years. And prior to that, I worked with homeless youth. And I have seen human trafficking the whole time I've been in this field. So while it has a new name and we are sort of more aware of it and talking about it, it really has been happening in Kingston for as long as I've really been working in this field. So one of the things that we do at the center is when we meet someone, a lot of the times I will say they're there, just as Lana mentioned, they may be coming in because of another experience of abuse or assault and not recognizing that the support person that they may be depending on, especially for young people, is actually trafficking them. So it actually isn't the support person that they're thinking of as being a nice, kind boyfriend. Generally, it's often the trafficker. So we have to do quite a bit of education, in particular with the young folks around that what they are experiencing is trafficking, which is hard to do sometimes because the trafficker is really good at providing the needs for the person at that moment, whatever it might be. It could be drugs, it could be, as was mentioned, clothes, affection, attachment, whatever. So it can be really difficult, but we work sort of in two stages. So we do sort of a safety and stabilization stage in the beginning, where we really focus on creating safety and stabilization with the client. And that's where clients really learn to learn about their trauma responses, learn about their coping skills, learn that what they've been doing to survive is really a reaction to an experience of trauma that they've had. We really focus on, meeting those needs, in particular for HT survivors and victims, meeting the needs that the trafficker is fulfilling. So how can we get someone else, or how can we find support for that person so that they're not relying so much on the trafficker and they can really exit. We also look at anxiety, flashbacks, sleep challenges, right? All those things that come with someone who's experienced trauma. We work really within a trauma-informed framework. So we, the safety, the trustworthiness, peer support, collaboration with other community agencies. And then the most important thing is giving empowerment, voice, and choice back to the survivor. So giving them some kind of control in that safety and stabilization sort of piece. And then we really move into the trauma processing, which can be really difficult for a lot of folks. And sometimes for those who have been trafficked, you know, they've experienced another form of trauma. It might not be the trafficked or being trafficked that they're working on. It could be something from their childhood, et cetera. So we really try to help them develop resources. They can focus on their understanding and the experience, exploring those patterns of thinking and feeling that they've had as, you know, a victim and a survivor. It's really about transforming stories and beliefs that they have about themselves and the world. So as Lana mentioned, a lot of people come in with really negative self-confidence, self-worth. They're really feeling not great about themselves and the world. They haven't experienced a lot of positive trust. They're constantly living in this sort of toxic stress environment. And so part of our job is really helping to move them to experiencing tolerable stress and really getting rid of the fatigue that comes with experiencing constant chronic physical and mental stress that comes with living in a traffic situation, right? Where your brain is constantly on high alert. And while you're getting your physical needs, maybe you're not really getting those emotional needs met. So part of our job is really to help move someone, educate them on what they've experienced, and then help them move a little bit forward by giving them that empowerment and that choice as well. We've been really lucky in Kingston that, and I know Lisa Fox is going to come up next, so I don't want to take all your time, Lisa, but we've been really fortunate that our community has come together in the last few years, and we do have a community coalition. So we do have a working group in Kingston, the KFL&A Anti-Human Trafficking Working Group in Kingston. So all of our agencies, myself, KH, Lana and Ed, probation, parole, Elizabeth Fry, Queens, oh gosh, who else is on there? The police, oh, I said Ed. A lot of agencies are all together working and creating a community protocol so that we can better respond to survivors when they come forward. I was watching my time. How did I do?
You did great, Kim. Thank you so much. A lot of information. And I know that's a really important step on how you get people back into the community and through their trauma. So thank you. Lisa, we'll turn to you. Lisa Fox is with Kingston Interval House and very actively involved, as you heard, in the working group. So Lisa.
Thank you. So I think we're over time. I will keep it short because it's more important to have questions and have that kind of dialogue. So I'm Lisa Fox. I work at Kingston Interval House and I'm the Women's Community Counselor. And I've been there a very long time. So I'm just going to talk about the supports so Kingston Interval House is a safe shelter for abused women, which now encompasses women that, youth and women that have been human trafficked as well. So we provide immediate safe shelter. It's 24/7. We try to meet whatever immediate needs that they have. So that could be if it's not a referral from Lana, that we would be referring this person to Lana for immediate needs like clothes, cell phone, those kinds of things. We would talk to the woman about her options. So if she was willing to report, that is always their choice, whether they would report to police or not. And there is a whole host of reasons why they often don't report to the police. And then once she, the immediate needs and the immediate crisis, and there's more stability, then we would be looking at counseling and support services. An important thing to know, so our social housing in Kingston and across Ontario actually, has priority status. So a regular housing, social housing list would be probably about 5 years on average in Kingston that people would wait, but they do have a priority list. So women who are identifying domestic violence and or human trafficking are often deemed appropriate for social housing. So that means they can get housing within probably, I'm going to say 3 to 6 months on average. So they can get stable housing that's affordable for them. If a woman comes into Kingston Integral House, the other thing that she can do is apply for Robin's Hope, which is our second stage supportive housing. She can stay there for up to 364 days in the supportive housing. And there she has like on-site support. My office happens to be there. So if I'm doing counseling, there's kind of more immediate support. So it's not 24/7, but it's still supportive. So that's that can be helpful to deal with sort of ongoing trauma and crisis. Another thing I just want to mention really quickly, the working group, the anti-trafficking working group, human trafficking, has done some training around a tool that was developed in California. It's from the West Coast Children's Clinic. And this is a universal screening tool. So it's called CIT, which stands for Commercial Sexual Exploitation Identification Tool. So we've done some training. There's people in our community who have trained the trainer, and we will be looking at all of the agencies that sit at the working group being a part of this. And that really is a screening tool. So it's really looking at risk youth. And that tool starts at the age of 10 and up. And you're really looking at a really holistic picture of potential risk and looking at vulnerabilities and being able to identify if they are A, at risk of being human trafficked, and B, if they actually are being human trafficked. So that's exciting for our community, and will be really nice to have that a part of our protocol as well. So yeah, I'll finish there. We have lots more to cover.
Thanks, Lisa. That was, it's wonderful to see the agencies working together, and your working group I know is made up of a number of community partners coming together, and it's wonderful, and we'll look forward to hearing more about your progress. What I love is that you're looking at prevention and trying to get to young people 10 and over, or even younger. So that's a wonderful step. And I know the work in schools is starting in elementary schools. I know Heather, who's on the call, had mentioned she's a principal of an elementary school, how you know the signs start showing early on. So really appreciate that. We're going to go to a quick Q&A session. So I know we have one question in the chat from Jen Cameron for Lana and Ed about what age do you start educating young people about human trafficking?
Well, I guess the simple answer is whatever age we're asked to speak at, like whatever level. I have never turned down a presentation, and I've been asked to speak only as young as I think grade 7, 8. If I were asked to educate youth in elementary schools, I certainly would, but at this point, I haven't had any requests to go that young.
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely the high schools have been, they're well trained at the adolescents in high schools.
Thank you. And I know you also do training in places like One Roof, where we've heard there are a lot of victims who end up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions for any of our panelists or all the panelists? Any comments?
Julie Parker. Thank you, Bhavana, Jessica, Jane, Alexis, and all the panel for this is really helpful. I think it's about 4 years ago that I became aware of human trafficking. I think it was Alexis who was speaking to us, and I was totally surprised about it happening in Kingston. I mean, it just seemed like a crazy idea. I'm wondering, do they find, or do people find that there's a language barrier for some of the women, like a young woman from Budapest was mentioned. And if there are language barriers, even occasionally, do they have interpreters to help these individuals?
I see Alexis shaking her head. I don't know if anyone else wanted to respond. Lana, do you?
Okay. Yeah, we have been known to bring in interpreters if the need arises, for sure.
Okay, so there is a need for, from time to time, there is a need. It's not just people in.
I want to say my experience has been very rare, but we do have interpreters that we can call upon if the need arises, right?
Good.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind as well is the large majority of trafficking victims are female victims that were born and raised in Canada or permanent residents of Canada. So we're not seeing a lot of victims smuggled into the country. It's more sort of a domestic problem.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking more of the young woman, like the woman from Budapest, who, answers an email or asks a request to come and be a nanny or, be a helper and that sort of thing. I guess we don't see a lot of that in Kingston. Is that what you're saying?
And Angie, I'm not sure if you're aware, because I know you work with chiefs of police across the province. You're on mute, sorry.
Someone's got to be that guy. We just had a presentation from Jesse Braun, who is working with the Eastern Region OPP team, and so my sense is from them that it, just as Ed said, that it is quite local, or they're transient Quebec coming through the provinces. So your question was about the whether they come from abroad, correct? Yeah. I'm just wanting to make sure I answer the question. I think that, maybe earlier on, and I mean, with Kamea, she was in the early 1990s, and so I think that happens. But I think what we're seeing the majority of is that, as Ed said, and as Lana said, that it is more local, and it's people that are from Canada, maybe first generation, second generation, but it's still within Canada.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
There are a couple of comments in the chat. Kim, do you want to read out? I think Caroline and Heather have comments. Kim Hockey, yeah. Your sound's not working, sorry.
Okay now?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Caroline has a question in her comment. Yeah, your sound's gone. I'll just try to read it. I'm squinting a bit, but I'll get it.
Well, I could read it too, Bhavana, if you like.
Okay, Caroline, go ahead.
It was a question that, listening to this discussion, you can identify where the root causes might be. Some of it is clearly kids who have conflict with their parents, kids who have low self-esteem for reasons to do with what's happening in school, and then I'm just wondering if we had all the resources we could possibly need, we could put it into extra counselling for schools, we could work with children more, we could do this education that you're talking about. And it's fairly shocking about the lack of affordable housing in Kingston, which is, to me, seems to be another root cause of it. So is it that we need a balance of all these things, or is the one thing that perhaps is most important and, would be a root cause to really attack first? I'm just wondering about that.
So to panelists or to Alexis, what should What should we attack first?
I don't think there's any like one thing that stands out more than others, because what happens with one girl and her situation might be completely different. Sorry, that's my dishwasher. Completely different from what's going on with another girl. So I think like all of those topics need to be hit when working with the counselors and parents. And obviously Kingston's housing market is just atrocious, and yet there is zero affordable housing for teenagers in Kingston. I mean, for example, when I was 17 and looking for a place for myself, I mean, realistically speaking, I was trying to go to school. I was being human trafficked by these guys and not seeing any money from it. And I was still trying to hold down a job. And if you take all three of those things into account, there's no way that I could have physically made enough money to afford a house for myself. So I was under the finger of other people because they had control over my basic needs. Like basic, I guess, yes, if anything was to come first, basic needs need to be met. Food, clothes, shelter. And then, you know, once the women have that, and men too, they'd probably be able to be in a better situation to reach out to counselors or to receive support from outside agencies.
Alexis, since you're on, Jillian has a question. Do you think circumstances have changed since you've been involved?
Yeah, I mean, technology was a very big thing when I was in high school, but it's even more prevalent now with, you know, kids in elementary schools. With the kids that I work with, you know, out here, for example, I've had issues with girls as young as like grade 4 putting like really provocative things online and, you know, not understanding internet safety. So I think circumstances have changed just with the development of technology and how, you know, you can go on Snapchat nowadays and see wherever all your friends are if they have their maps turned on, and, you know, sharing your location with your friends. And just with that, I think with the evolution of technology, I think the circumstances have changed a bit since I was involved. And
Thanks.
whether there was more help. I think, you know, as each day goes on, to just wrapping up the end of that question, I think as each day goes on and more people are educated on human trafficking, and, you know, they're educated on the signs and red flags that are coming up. I think that we are beginning to have more help within the community because more people are aware of what's going on. And there's new agencies that are coming up every day with different ways to support girls and men who are involved in human trafficking.
I see a couple more hands and then we'll turn it over to Jane. So I see Sue, Angie, and Janice.
Hi, should I go then?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this question, but something that I've never really heard anyone speak to, and maybe Alexis would be able to comment on it because, you know, you are really on the inside of this kind of situation. But I'm wondering about prevention of root causes about the perpetrators, and especially if these are young, primarily men. How do they get courted into becoming these perpetrators? And
I'm not really too sure about that. I think, you know, if I go back to what I said in my speech about, you know, nobody wakes up wanting to be addicted to drugs. I don't think anybody, you know, as a child wakes up and says, you know, like, I'd like to be a pimp. That is what I would like to do. I think, you know, when kids know better, they do better. And when children are taught, you know, the difference between right and wrong and why it's important to make the right choices at a young age, you know, I feel like not everyone would turn out to do such horrible things like the men that I dealt with. But I don't think that, you know, at 10 years old, a child wakes up and says, like, I want to be somebody that ruins somebody else's life or tries to, you know what I mean? It's unfortunate that there is people like that, but I think that, you know, they were probably led down a really scary and unfortunate road that led them to where they are today. And, you know, perhaps if they had somebody when they were younger to intervene and show them the difference between right and wrong, or give them like an outlet to speak to, maybe they wouldn't be where they are today. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
Thanks, Alexis. I think that's a whole topic into itself that I think we might consider for another discussion. I know Kim Graham has mentioned early childhood trauma and toxic masculinity. I know Resolve has a program for men who have been told by the court to go through anger management programs. Angie, and then Janice.
Just a comment with respect to young women getting out of human trafficking and how to reintegrate young women back into our community. And I know that we've got lots of obviously good partners that wrap around services and so forth, but to then maybe have enough money, as you said, you can't find housing, not enough money to get a house, but even education to have a job, so that they're not falling back into the human trafficking end of things. So I just wondered about whether that is there enough being done in that sense? Like, would that be funding, maybe government funding, you know, in terms of educational grants, getting back into school, getting into, you know, colleges, that kind of thing, so that they can support themselves and then sort of reintegrate back.
Great, thanks, Angie. We have Janice, and I know Julie has a hand up as well. Janice, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I'd just like to ask Alexis, you mentioned that Dave, the counselor, was very instrumental in helping you, you know, come back to society, sort of thing. But what part of you was so ready to change? You know what I mean? Because I believe from people being drug addicts, it's very, very difficult to stop taking drugs. So was there a huge part of you that really wanted to change?
I think after, you know, it was probably like my 3rd or 4th year being trafficked and using drugs, that Dave had said to me, like, why? If you have the choice right now, then why? And, you know, I left his office all mad that day. And, oh, he doesn't understand me, and he's not even listening. But it really made me think. I was very lucky in the sense that I still had some control over myself when I was being trafficked. And not that any of it was a choice to me, but I could have made the choice to go contact the police. I could make the choice to go and receive help at SAC Kingston. I made the choice to go and receive help from Dave, and he kind of like pulled the curtain over for me and, you know, showed me that like I still have control over a lot of things in my life. And if you want to do better, something needs to change. And I just woke up the one day and I was done with it. I was done with, you know, feeling about this big every day. I was done feeling sick from doing drugs all the time. I was definitely done living up to the standards that my principal and vice principal, who had kicked me out, you know, put me up to. Mm-hmm. I was definitely put into a box of like, oh, she's not going to be able to do anything with her life. And I don't know what kind of lit the fire under my butt, but one day, like, I just woke up and I was angry. I was angry that people had put me in this box. I was angry that, you know, nobody besides Dave really could see my full potential, because I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I knew that I could do better. And I just decided to like take it and start shoving it in everyone's face, kind of deal. So for example, I ended up graduating 2 weeks before my graduating class, even though I was expelled from my high school. I graduated before everybody. I took it upon myself to go to college and get 2 diplomas because my mom told me that, you know, good for you, you're going to be the manager of a grocery store. Not that that's a bad job, but that's not where I saw myself. So I took it upon myself to take those 2 college programs. And then I took it upon myself to, you know, kind of stick it to the man. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to apply to the same school board that kicked me out 4 years ago. And, you know, the funny thing is when I went in for that interview, the lady who did my interview was the same principal who expelled me when I was in grade 12. So I was really able to, you know, prove everybody wrong. And once I graduated from my college programs, it was kind of like the aha moment of like, I'm not going to be that statistic, you know, not going to be 17 and pregnant and not have a job and not have post-secondary education. I'm not going to be, you know, the manager of the grocery store like my mom said I was going to be. I'm going to be whatever I want to be, and I'm going to be really good at it. And, you know, I sat with Dave the one day, and we were talking about, well, you know, I'm going to scoop ice cream for the rest of my life. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get a job. And when I got hired on to Limestone District School Board, that was like, you know, I made it. Like, I am not the statistic. I am the best version of myself. And I decided the one day to pack up and move out here. And in a week, I made that decision, quit my job, sold everything I owned, packed my car up and drove across the country. And it was really, it started off, you know, me wanting to prove people wrong, but then it transformed into me wanting to prove myself right. Like, I can. If I put my mind to it, I can.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I know there are lots of questions in the chat, and Julie's waiting with her hand up, but I'm going to turn it to Jane Lapointe for now.
So we were going to break off now into smaller groups, but I'm wondering if, because we're having such good questions, if we want to stay in this main group, or do we want to stay in the main? Nod your head, put your hand up, or would you prefer yes? Okay, so I was going to do a little wrap up and thank you, but let's just keep talking, and Pavna, when you're ready for me to do my thank you, I will.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And thank you to everyone for their questions. It's great. So Julie, finally, I'm back to you.
Pavna, I think that was my hand up initially was to ask the question that I actually just shouted out because I had an opportunity to do it.
Okay.
So I won't take any more time up.
Okay, so we have another question. Martha Bella has asked, what's the youngest trafficked client seen at Victim Services? I don't know, Lana and Ed, if you want to answer that one.
So I would say in my experience, 12. I've had a couple who have been 12 at the onset.
I have a child out in BC who recently just disclosed some information to some staff members, and she's 8 years old, being trafficked by a family member. So there's really no age limit on this stuff, which is unfortunate.
Kim Peachy has asked an interesting question. I also wonder about the clients and how that side is being addressed, as they should be culpable. Anyone? Police? Lana? Ed?
Especially after just hearing that, I mean, I don't want to take, you know, I'm not trying to take away from the victims. I know they're the most important, and it just the whole thing when you sit and you listen. And I think, well, why do we have the clientele? That's what kind of also raises my anger. You know, I'm like, where's the clientele for this, and how? You know, why is that there, and why is that so big, and how is that managed? So sorry, it could just be that could just be anger coming through, but I'm just wondering, you know, what the process is for when the clientele is caught. Or
well, that might come back to that root cause that Sue and Kim Graham and all are referring to. So maybe we'll think about that as a topic. About helping people understand right from wrong, the whole ACEs and trauma. The other question that Julie McLaughlin has is, how do we help with the stigma? I think that is the hardest part about getting help. Anyone? Kim, Lisa, Lana, Alexis, Lana?
Okay, I can speak to that from my experience. Non-judgmental approach obviously is the way we roll. I meet my clients, or I refer to them as clients, but I meet them where they're at and in the moment in time. Some of them I'm being called to aren't disclosing to me. It's just strongly suspected, right? So I'm just starting a conversation and hoping that I can build up enough rapport with the client or victim to have them to at least disclose to me, maybe further on down the road disclose to police. But all of them, they just want to be treated as a normal human being and have that non-judgmental approach, right? what their experiences, they don't define them as a person. They're all people. And unfortunately, they've been through some horrific ordeals, and just being supportive, right, is all we can really do. And I think they appreciate that. And I want to say I've had success with that approach, because a lot of the girls that I've been called to speak to at 14 or 15, initial contact isn't always very successful, okay? But they remember me down the road, because, you know, I've been doing this since 2017, and now I'm getting calls 6 months or a year later from these girls who have remembered that initial contact and the way I've treated them. And then at the point when they're ready, they reach out.
Thank you, Lana. Alexis, and then I think Angie has her hand up.
I just wanted to speak to what Lana just said about the non-judgmental approach. I know personally, I had Dave as a youth diversion counselor for 2 years before I had disclosed anything to him. And it wasn't until I finally realized that, you know, he wasn't gonna make a big to-do about it. I didn't want anyone to, you know, oh, poor Alexis, oh, let me help you do this and let me help you do that. I needed someone that was there to support me. And, you know, Dave, the initial contact, like Lana was saying, it wasn't the best. I pretty much told him where to go and how to get there. And he kept coming back and he kept coming back. And eventually I got to the point with him that I knew that I could disclose this information, and he was going to treat me the exact same way he has treated me for the 2 years prior to. And, you know, I was really thankful and really lucky that I was connected with a counselor who did that, because when I did disclose that to Dave, I'll never forget it. So nonchalantly, he's sitting in his chair, and I told him about it, and he was like, well, do you want to talk about it? And I said, no. And he was like, okay. And off to the next topic he went. And, you know, he really waited until I was comfortable to talk about it, and, you know, wanted to get more support before he started offering, you know, like, let's go see SAC. Do you want to talk to the police? He didn't, you know, jump on it and shove all of this down my throat at one moment. He let me be in control of the situation. He let me come to him with my concerns and, you know, things that I wanted to talk about. So I think, just like Lana was saying, the non-judgmental approach, and, you know, everyone wants to be treated like the normal person, like the average person. That's probably one of the most important things out there.
Thanks, Alexis. Angie, you had your hand up?
Yep, so I just wondered about, you know, the community approach and something like that, because, you know, we've got lots of vulnerable people around, and we've got a lot of community people that maybe aren't so sensitive to that, you know, and I'm wondering about trauma-informed approach as a community project. You know, I know that that's being done now with training community-wide with leaders, and, you know, whether it's, you know, in the hospitals and you know, policing and non-traditional areas where we wouldn't really be having done that in the past, which would lead to that non-judgmental approach, understanding, walking in somebody else's shoes, you know, and having that more of that community approach and things, you know, so it helps the community. It's just not certain people, so it's more of a group effort.
Yeah. It must be hard not to react, Alexis. You know, your point about David sitting back and letting you take your time. I know most of us would not think of that. We'd want to help right away, right? And that would be frightening and probably turn the person away. So lots of learning to do. When Lana and I had spoken earlier, she had talked about some of the things that people can give to support you know, the anti-human trafficking, the work that's happening. And some of them are as simple as gift cards, you know, like a Tim Hortons, McDonald's. Lana, I'm just repeating what you told me, that having gift cards, being able to take them to a cafe and a coffee shop and talk, giving them some vouchers so afterwards they can have a meal. Even things like flip-flops, because sometimes they show up at the hospital without shoes. Lana, do you want to talk about the kinds of things you told me would be needed?
Yeah, in my job, having something that I can give them that they need is huge, right? It goes a long way for building rapport and gaining their trust. And also the fact that I can give them something that's useful to them without asking for anything in return. Because these women and boys, are always having to do something for someone else, right? They get nothing for free. So if I'm able to provide them with something, like I said, it goes a long way for building rapport and trust. A lot of them are hungry or in need of particular items like clothing and toiletry items. I had a girl call me last week, like, I really need tampons. Well, okay, I'll help you out, right? So whatever I can do, and gift cards are a great way because often they are hungry. So even if it's like $10 or $20 increment to like Subway, McDonald's, Tim Hortons, those types of places. Sometimes Shoppers Drug Mart gift cards are also good. But yeah.
Yeah. So we've taken the list that Lana's given us, even some of the suggested sizes for yoga pants and t-shirts. It's on our website, so feel free. If you do feel you want to make a difference, you can drop them off at the United Way or call us and we'll come pick them up and then make sure that Lana has them. Lisa and Kim, is there anything that you think people can do to help?
I think, sorry, Lisa, we started at the same time. Sort of what you were touching on before about when we were talking about non-judgmental is have that same empathy and compassion that you might have for someone who's young to those folks that are also maybe a little bit older, because they're also struggling and probably have experienced the same thing and just didn't have and didn't have that Dave that Alexis had to support. So I just always want to end and just say, like, you know, when we sometimes talk about youth and how we can really help and support them, but there are older people who are being trafficked and experience trafficking as well, and or who experienced it when they were younger and just didn't have that intervention. So having that same sort of empathy and compassion for everyone that you meet can make a difference in someone. You know, even just a simple hello on the street can really make a difference for someone, because it brings back their humanity and their self-worth.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. Lisa.
I was just going to say quickly that, you know, doing something like today is amazing, because raising the awareness, it just makes you watch a little bit closer. So, you know, I heard a story once about someone being on a patio in downtown Toronto. It was at a hotel, but it was an outdoor patio on the, you know, at the top of the building or whatever. And someone was pretty sure that there was trafficking or something happening. So, you know, they were able to just reach out and say, do you need help? Or, you know, you can always call the police. So, I mean, the awareness and understanding that it's happening, just, I mean, that's fantastic. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to turn it over to Jane Lapointe now, our co-chair.
Thanks, Bhavana. So I guess we're probably just getting towards the end now. I'm wrapping things up. So number one, Alexis, I just really want to say thank you. You know, it makes all of our hearts sing to see you doing so well. I look around the screen and I think you've got all of these United Way aunties on the screen that you're just a part of our family. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, and to our panelists too, obviously the work that you're doing in our community is incredible, that you could take the time today to come to speak to us. You know, our group is really hungry to learn and to be better educated about these things that are happening in our community, and we're always looking for ways that we can help as well. So we really, really thank you. It's incredible the time that you've given us and the work that you're doing. Really means a lot. And then, you know, as much as I look around and say to Alexis that she's got all of these aunties, I look around and I see all of these sisters that I have. And so to each of our Women United that are here with us tonight, and those that couldn't make it or had to sign off early, really do have an incredible group of people here. And so I just thank you as well for taking the time and the commitment to come together for this.
Thanks, Jane. And thank you, Jane and Jessica, for your leadership, and to the Women United Committee for all the advice in setting this up. To our panelists, one more time, thank you so much. We have recorded this. We will put it up on our website. So if you want someone else to learn more about this issue, feel free to direct them to the website. And again, as I said, there is a list on our website that tells you what you can donate, that we will make sure that Lana and her group get. Every step we take is towards helping people in our community. And I cannot thank you enough. I know this is tough. It's heartbreaking to think of people of all genders who are going through this, not just in Kingston, but around the world and in Canada. And I thank you for your compassion. I thank you for your caring. And I thank you for all you're doing to get us closer and closer to finding solutions, root causes, continuing to work on prevention. And you're a part of this. So thank you and have a great night.